Hello and welcome to Write, Read, Talk, Live, where everything centres around just that: writing life, reading life, talking life, and living life. Here we'll be talking about articles, essays, fiction, and poetry by me. And this is basically the chronicles of my life as a university student and an emerging writer. So, what I've got in store for you guys today is I figured I've recently put a blog post up on my website, writereadtalklive.wixsite.com/write, read, talk, live. And if you click on my writing section, you'll see that the blog post that I've just posted up is So I Was Failing or Was I? And so today I figured I'm going to do a little bit of reading for you because it's probably one of my longer posts, but it's also a really important post to me because it's about studying and it's about essay writing and it's about the tips and tricks that I've kind of learned along the way. And I really just wanted to share those with you. So if you're not in the mood for reading, then this is going to be for you. So let's get started. So I feel like the biggest problem or the biggest mistake that we all make as students is that we tend to kind of let our busyness and our life kind of get in the way. And I think that just happens in life in general, if we're being honest with ourselves. But what I wanted to do is give you a few little tips and hints, things that I've figured out along the way, so that you can learn to work smarter and not necessarily work harder. So, just a little bit about myself. I'm actually a mum of 3 children. My youngest is 6, my middle child is 9, and my eldest will be 12 in November. Now, I actually also homeschool our 3 children with my husband, and I also study full time, and my husband works full time. So, my husband and I actually really cherish our family time, and studying for me is something that I'm really passionate about, but it also has to work in with my family life for many, many reasons. We obviously have to prioritize our children's education and learning, and then, have time in there for family and fun as well. So many people do tend to ask me, how do I do this? How do I actually juggle all of this stuff? And the truth is that I'm actually a ridiculously crazy night owl. And doing during those nighttime hours is I'm kind of making up for assignments and study time as well. Now, I do also dedicate certain days during the week for my studying as well. And I try and do that in a way that doesn't interrupt our schedule. So my husband actually works shift work. So I tend to try and make my study days where he's at work. And then the days where he's at home, we tend to, do fun things together. But, it doesn't always work that way. Life's hard. Life can be hectic, especially because I'm studying full time. Some weeks I have multiple assignments due at once. So those weeks are really hectic. I'm not saying it's super easy, but I'm saying it takes commitment and it takes dedication and it takes a little bit of ownership as well, and just being responsible for yourself. So I really feel like the tips that I've got for you are essential for any busy mums and dads out there, anyone who's working full time. And I'm really saying this to you because if I can do this, I know that you can too. And I really want to set you up with the tools that are going to help you succeed as well. So, uni is hard work, and everybody knows that it's hard work. There's nothing about university that's easy. But what we do fail to acknowledge is that the grade we get at the end of each assignment does not determine our success or our overall intelligence. So just let that sink in just for a second. Our assignments and our marks do not determine our success or our intelligence. Now, this is really, really important because for somebody like me, who actually really hated school, I really didn't like school, I didn't enjoy it, I felt like it almost sucked the creativity out of me. But the reality is I actually really enjoy learning. And I think the difference is when you begin to learn because it's your passion and it's something that you're really, really keen on just getting to know more about, then things change. Magic does start to happen. So I feel like our grades are something that just really reflects a learning curve. It's a nod to the ability that you have to translate and understand the learning materials into your own words. It's a reflection of our efforts and it's a reflection of our abilities in that moment. But it's certainly not a reflection of our abilities going forward. So I really feel like learning is the result of all things. There's really nothing that you can do in life where you're not learning in some way or another. I feel like life skills are these amazing things that kind of set us up to learn other little bits and pieces along the way. You may not figure it at the time, you may not understand it at the time, you may not even know that you're learning at the time, but eventually there may be a light bulb moment where you go, oh, I know this. I know what I'm supposed to do in this moment. I know that thing. I know what they're talking about. I can contribute here. So, learning is the result of all things, and it is the magic that happens when we do. But learning for me definitely happens upon reflection. So it may not even happen until after a semester. It may not even happen until after a year, or it may happen instantly. It may happen as soon as I start a unit and I start to read things. I might go, oh, wow, I really, I get this. I'm really moving forward. But in terms of failure, I think failure is something that happens when we tell ourselves that it's the final result. When we tell ourselves, I don't get this, so therefore I must be failing. I'm not doing well at this, therefore I must be failing. And I feel like we really have to stop doing this. We have to stop saying, I failed, therefore I can't do. And instead, we have to analyze our failures and dissect them for reflection so that we can learn from them, because failure is a blessing. And when we fail and continue on in life, I think that there's something really powerful in that. And maybe even something a little magical in that too. To be able to pick yourself up when you're failing and to be able to say, no, I'm going to keep going here. There's real strength there. And I feel like as long as you're failing and learning, then you're doing okay. So earlier this year, I actually took on 2 units. It was the first 2 units that I took for the year. And the units were writing, rhetoric, and persuasion, and introduction to writing. Now, I study online, fully online, because, well, mum, 3, and homeschooling. So, I really don't have time to actually be going to a campus, nor do I even have the ability to do that right now. But at the moment, the degree that I'm studying is through Curtin University, and I'm doing that through Open Universities, which allows me to be able to do these units fully online. Now, that semester in particular at the beginning of the year was by far my worst. There were a few little bits and pieces that were happening, a lot of life things that were getting in the way, and there were a few little personal tragedies. And actually, I've got a personal essay up on my website. Once again, that's writereadtalklive.wixsite.com/writereadtalklive. And under my writing section, it's actually the personal essay. But truthfully, even outside of that, even outside of all the personal tragedies and the difficulties that I suffered during that semester, I actually probably learnt the most too. And that's why I wrote this blog, and that's why I'm talking to you guys today, because I actually really want to share with you what I've learned. Because what I learned was how to study smarter and not harder, because during that semester, I was actually failing myself because I stopped following my own system. I did. I stopped following my own system. I don't know, it was one of those moments, having a bad time in life. These things happen. Nobody's perfect. These things happen all the time. But I picked myself up, I reflected on my struggles, and I pushed myself forward. And actually, in those moments, I really turned things around. I really, really did. And I turned them around because I wanted to. I really wanted to. I committed to it. I owned it. I admitted to myself what was happening. So here we go. I'm going to give you some tips on how to set yourself up for success. And I'm going to share with you the fundamentals of essay writing, just a few little tips. There's actually a video over on my blog that goes into more detail on essay writing, and actually I really, really recommend it. It's actually by one of my tutors, Stuart Woods, and the link's up on my website. So go and check that out too, because even if you are a well-versed writer and you're well within your years at university, there are still some really great tips here, and I'd really, really like you to see it. Also over at my Instagram, links on my website, I've got 3 really essential books that I've listed up there today that help me through my studying. And I really just think that they're awesome tools to have in your arsenal, whether you're a writer, whether you're a student or not. I think that they're really awesome books just to have on hand, and it's really going to set you up for a great professional life as well. So here's my approach to studying. This is a system that I use. So first and foremost, prioritizing is key. And I know that everybody probably sits around going, why? Why do I have to prioritize? I'm one of those people that crams. Please don't do it. Because if you don't prioritize, you'll honestly be rushed from the very beginning, from the very get-go, and you just won't produce your best work. When you prioritize your workload, you'll know what's due, you'll know what's due and when, and then you can dedicate your time and just carve out some time that best suits you and your schedule. You know your schedule better than anyone, so figure it out and set that time aside for yourself. Whether that's at night, whether that's during the day, whether it's afternoons, evenings, weekends, you do you. Now, when you set that time aside, make some notes each week on the readings and your tutorials. It's really important to make these notes in your own words because it helps you and your learning process. It helps you create your own kind of memories of what it is you're reading. And I really do feel like it helps to cement the learning materials. So I personally set aside a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I set aside the mornings for my studying. Now, even though I'm a night owl, yes, I do. I set aside the mornings, crazy as it sounds, and I really do treat it very much like a work day. So I set an alarm, I shower, I make myself presentable, I make a coffee, and then I sit myself down at my desk and I have everything available and accessible to me, and then I just study. I sit and I study. I read the weekly materials. I interact on the discussion boards. I chat to my tutor if I need to. And I listen to the tutorials. So some tools that I use to help me with my prioritizing and my notes and all that kind of stuff is I actually use OneNote. Now I set up different tabs for each unit, and under each unit I set different tabs for each weekly activity. And then I tend to like having separate notes for my tutorials and the unit reading, so I like to have those separate. Mainly because I just like to know that I can access, I know that this is for tutorials, I know that this is for my readings, and at the top of each page, I make a real note of what it is that I'm actually taking notes on, so that there's no confusion. I don't have to go back and forwards. It's all just there for me. Now, I also use an app on my phone called eGender. That's EGENDER. And it is actually available on Android and Apple devices. And I use that to set up a reminder for all of my due tasks. So what it basically does is the assignments that you have due, you set those in there, and then each day it kind of sends you a reminder. So it'll sort of say to me, so for example, this morning it says, gives me an update saying you have 0 assignments due, which I don't. But I do have assignments due at the end of the week, and I can go in there and I can sort of set different tasks, and then it will alarm me the day before as well to say that it's due. So that's prioritizing. And then your next step after prioritizing is to plan your attack. And I know that this seems like a really obvious step, but it's also the single most contributing factor to students losing points on assignments is just not planning and not prioritizing your attack. So what you need to do is you need to plan each assignment starting with understanding what the assignment is actually about. So what you need to figure out is what the assignment is asking of you. And then what you need to do is confirm what your word limit is, what the style of the assignment is. Is it an analytical essay? Is it argumentative, report? Is it an exegesis? And then what you need to do is understand, what have you read so far? Because, leading up to each assignment, you'll have certain reading materials that are laying out the foundations for what you are to display as what you're learning. And then what you need to do after you've read your reading materials is you need to kind of possibly even do a little bit of research on your own to figure out how you can extend your learning and your understanding of the materials. Further to that, you need to also understand what your understanding of the unit materials are so far. If at this stage, say your first assignment's due week 4, if at that stage you're really lost in your understanding of the unit materials, this is the best time for you to speak up. This is the best time for you to go and have a chat to your tutor, have a chat to your other students, and do whatever you need to do. But the worst thing you can do is not say anything, because it's going to show in your marks, and then you're going to be really disappointed, especially when it's just so easy to ask for help. Now, once you can answer all of those things, once you know what your assignment is about, what the word limit is and what the style guide is, once you know what you've read so far and what you've learnt so far, once you've kind of got an understanding of how you can enhance your reading and your learning experience, once you can answer all of those things, that's when you can start to work on your drafting phase. And like I said, if at this point you are unsure and you can't answer any of those things, just go straight to your tutor. Ask them, send them an email, hit up the discussion board, do whatever you need to do to confirm that you're on the right track, or where you can go to get onto the right track. Now, it's also an excellent idea to take a look at your marking rubric here for each assignment as well, because that way you can understand what your marker or your tutor is actually looking for during that assignment. Now, I've got a few little tips here for you, but again, on the drafting process, especially about a thesis statement, because that really is the foundation for all assignments. But what I've got here is just a really brief outline, because I really just want to set you up with the planning tools at the moment. But again, the video that I've actually got on the blog, on my blog site, writereadtalklive.wixsite.com, and inside this blog post, So I Was Failing or Was I? At the very bottom is the YouTube video by my tutor, Stuart Woods. So you'll really want to get onto that. Trust me, it's going to be your absolute best friend. And you may even refer back to that several times. And again, I've actually got some books that can help you on the actual writing process as well. So check out my Instagram for that. So with starting your draft, it's a good idea to start with a brief thesis statement. Now, a thesis statement is an overarching statement that symbolizes what it is you're going to be analyzing. So what you want to do once you've got your brief thesis statement sorted, now this may actually take a little while for you to get, by the way. So if, for example, your assignment is on the internet and everyday life, and how we use the internet in everyday life, your thesis may start off by thinking about, how do I interpret the internet in my life? How do I use the internet? What do I do every day? So, for example, that may then lead me down the track of thinking, well, I'm an online student, so the internet's really important for me. My thesis statement might begin somewhere along the lines of saying the internet is imperative to online students and the learning process going forward. Okay, so I mean that's a little rough. It's nobody used that. But what I'm saying is you really want to start writing a few things down. And as you start to write it, you may even start to kind of go off and create new things. And you really want to be obviously working that around A, your assignment question, what your assignment's actually about, and B, making sure that it's actually hitting the brief based on the unit materials you've read so far. So once you've got a brief thesis statement, now this can just be the beginning phase. Remember, this is a draft, so it may change. It may change several times. But once you've got your thesis statement, I want you to then figure out 3 key points, 4 maximum, that lead off from your thesis statement. Okay, so these have to directly relate back to your thesis statement, but are still addressing the question of, for my example, of internet and everyday life. Okay. So this will identify your key research areas, and it'll also get you started a lot faster. Because as soon as you uncover more through your research and your general understanding broadens, you can then refine your research, you can refine your thesis, and you can really pinpoint what those key elements are that you're going to address. It's always a really good idea to think about your limitations as well. So, if, for example, I'm talking about using the internet as a key form for me to be able to do my university degree, what I need to be thinking are, what are my limitations? So, the limitations to that are, well, I don't get any face to face interaction, but there are online forums, okay, and discussion boards. Other limitations might be that, well, not everybody has access to the internet. So that can be really difficult for people who want to be a uni student, can't go to university, but also don't have the internet or access to the internet. It may even be a issue of privacy, internet and privacy. It may be that your limitations are the internet and your speed limits. So, there are a few little things, but keep those limitations in mind, because I feel like that really helps to strengthen your essay when you know that you're addressing key points of what makes that work for your assignment, but then having a few little bits and pieces that can kind of highlight the limitations of your study and your findings as well. So once you've got a good understanding of your research and your approach or your direction, it's a really good time to also refer back to the assignment questions, just to make sure that you're addressing the brief. So again, for more details on writing a thesis statement and how to write an essay, I really do recommend that video. Trust me, you won't be sorry. So jump on my website, have a browse, and maybe even flick me a comment just to see how you liked it. The next step after we've prioritized, we've planned, the next step is editing. And it's really, really essential, guys. Trust me. If you don't have the time dedicated for your editing, it's just everything's going to fall apart. It doesn't matter how well you've researched. It doesn't matter how great your sources are. If you haven't prioritized your time and planned your attack well enough to have the essential time needed for editing, everything's going to fall apart. Because you don't really want to be rushing that editing phase. You need a really good chunk of time to edit, because this is where you'll pick up any holes in your research or your approach. So, as I've mentioned, you'll want to refer back to both your unit materials to date, and you'll want to evaluate if your research and your approach is hitting the brief. What you have to remember is that your points, every paragraph you have after your introduction, has to tie back into your thesis. And your thesis has to lead back to your assignment question. So if any of that isn't working, then unfortunately we're just off on the wrong track. And hopefully that's not happening, because if you've got these tips and if you've watched this video that I've got on my blog site, you won't have that problem, trust me. So what you need to be doing in this spell check, in this editing phase, is obviously a good spell check. But the problem is that even on Word documents, the spell check it's fairly basic. But what you need to be doing is, if you've got someone else who can actually read over your work as well, that's going to be really super helpful, because someone else can just pick up on the little bits and pieces that you can't, because you've written it, you're reading it in your head a certain way. It's just the way that our brains work. You just won't pick it up. And they're things that might cost you a few points here and there, but you'll be really disappointed if you're losing points on spell checking. I also recommend using Grammarly. So it's grammarly.com. Now, I use Grammarly. It's just a really good additional spell check site, and it helps with your grammar and your punctuation as well, and just sentence formations. It's actually a really handy tool, and it's served me quite well. Now, you do actually have to sign up to Grammarly, but it is free. The free service is like a basic service, but it's enough. Trust me, it's enough. I don't pay for it. I just use the free site. And what it allows you to do is you can upload or copy and paste paragraphs or even entire forms of your writing, and they'll make suggestions on the spelling and grammar and punctuation as well. So definitely get on that if you want to just go that little extra mile. Especially if you don't have someone to read your work, I really, really recommend you having an additional tool for spell checking and for grammar and punctuation. Whether that's Grammarly or something else that you already use, I really do highly recommend you using something else. You'll also want to make sure that you've formatted your essay correctly, and that you're adhering to any of the style and genre guides of the writing. So your tutors should actually give you instructions on this, because each unit may actually be different, and certainly each degree is different, because each degree uses different styles and formats and definitely different referencing systems. But you won't go into this blind. Your tutors will actually give you instructions on this, and if they don't, just simply ask them. Usually what they're looking for is a basic format, so say a Time New Roman. They're usually looking for a 12-point text size, and they're usually looking for 1.5 to 2 spacing. For essays, generally speaking, there are no headings, no subheadings. It's really just your introduction, your body, and then your conclusion, and each should flow on from each other. So at the beginning of each paragraph should set you up for what we're reading during the body of that paragraph, and then a brief sentence should actually wrap that up at the end and also lead on to the next paragraph. Your introduction should obviously be introducing you or your readers to what you're actually going to be analysing, including your thesis statement should be in there. And then your conclusion is really just wrapping up all the things. You shouldn't be introducing any new ideas here. It should all just be tying back in and wrapping everything up, basically. So you'll also want to double check that your sources are correct. So everything that you've cited, everything that you've referenced, all adheres to the referencing style that your unit requires. Now, again, your tutor will actually give you instructions on this, and they should give you instructions on this from the very beginning. I've personally used a few different referencing styles before, but the most consistent one I've used now is APA 6th. Now, I also use a website, because each referencing style does tend to have a dedicated website with examples and instructions of how to cite things and how to reference certain things. So I've actually got a few of my favorites for APA 6 on my website. So jump back onto this blog on writereadtalklive.wixsite.com. Go under So I Was Failing or Was I article, and a little way down under the editing section, you'll see that I've got for APA 6, my favourite site to use is here, and then there's a link that takes you to that. So this is also a really good time for you to check that your assignment meets the criteria as well. So double checking word count, double checking references, style, and that the instructions that you've been given for that assignment are all being hit. You may even want to refer back to your marking rubric, and just to make sure that it's all nice and neat and tidy and hitting what you need it to be hitting. The next stage for me And sometimes this comes after the actual assignment as well, but it also comes beforehand. And it's probably the most important tip that I'll give you. And it's taking ownership, taking responsibility, and just being reflective of your work. Now, this is the overarching step because, above all things, taking ownership and responsibility for your work is going to get you off to the best start because you're actually in control and there are no excuses. There are zero, there are none. Trust me, there's none. You might give yourself some excuses, but really, when you sit and reflect and say to yourself, actually, there are excuses here because I'm allowing there to be excuses, then you'll realize that actually you are in control of all of this. If you begin your studies with a relaxed and complacent attitude and approach, you're just not going to get the most out of your learning experience. In the end, really, if you're proud of what you've done, and if you've completed the fundamental steps that we've talked about today, so you've prioritized, you've planned, you've got a good amount of time for editing, and you've taken ownership and responsibility, and you're reflective in your work, then you're going to be creating something to be proud of, okay? And you're really going to be in the best space for learning as well. Because we all want to make good grades to be proud of. We do. No one wants to actually fail. No one goes into something going, I'm just going to give it my most mediocre shot here. We all want to do the best that we can. But ultimately, our grades can only reflect a small portion of our abilities, and they don't determine our overall success. Not everyone can study. Not everyone's good at studying. Some people can sit tests, but be really just lack the ability to actually retain information. It just is what it is. Some people can retain information and then lack the appropriate abilities to interpret that into everyday working life. It just is what it is. So we need to stop being so hard on ourselves, because I feel like in the end, when you stop and reflect back, there's still learning happening there. There's still moments of reflection, and there's still things that we can do to kind of increase our abilities and turn things around. When you take ownership and when you're responsible for your own work, you really are taking responsibility and ownership for your own success. Now, your passion and your dedication will reflect your efforts. And if you don't get the marks you're looking for or that you're expecting, this time round, reflect back on your instructor feedback where possible. And if you don't get any feedback from them, ask for some. Because when you ask for feedback and when you get feedback and when you reflect back on the things that you didn't do so well, it's actually not a failure. It's probably the biggest success of your life when you take that feedback and you turn it around and you make it something special. More importantly, don't accept failure as your final result. Just don't do it. Think of yourself in terms of somebody who is just learning along the way. We are all human. We all fail at things. Trust me, I was failing one of these units. I was failing it. I was one bad mark away from failing. Now, I've actually done uni before. I took a year off last year because my dad was actually quite unwell, had a few family emergencies. It just wasn't a good time, wasn't a good space for studying. And when I started back, I obviously started back with these 2 units. So the writing, rhetoric and persuasion and introduction to writing. Now, I was actually doing really, really well with introduction to writing, and I really wasn't doing well at writing, rhetoric and persuasion, and I just didn't know why. I felt like I got the unit, I got the materials, I got everything that I was supposed to be doing. But the truth is, I was really rushed for time. I really wasn't dedicating the time that I needed to complete the task properly. And I really wasn't actually referring back to any of my unit materials or even just using my system. I just failed to use my system. Now, admittedly, it was a really bad time. Again, it was a very personally hard struggle that I was going through at that point in time. But that's still no excuse. I still chose to do my studying. And because I chose to do that, I should have chosen better. But I didn't. I failed myself, and it showed. It showed in my marks. And until about, it was probably assignment 2 to assignment 3. Each assignment I started getting better and better marks, because it hurt to be failing at it. So each assignment I was getting better marks, but probably by assignment 3, I'd say I was really in a good headspace. I was really taking ownership for my work and my input and my abilities. I was really putting a lot of time and effort into it. And then by assignment 4, it was actually a reflection report that I had to do, and it was my best mark yet. So I ended up getting a high distinction for my last assignment. I passed the overall unit, thank goodness, because I really couldn't have done it again, I don't think. But funnily enough, my other unit that I was doing, I was getting high distinctions, and I got an overall high distinction for that. But I think the difference was I got off on a really good foot with one unit and not the other. I really enjoyed one unit. The other unit was, it was a little bit tedious, but still, I had to own that. I had to own my commitment to that, and my complacency got me the results that I deserved, basically. And until the end, when I really started putting that time in, that's when I could be really proud of the work that I was doing. So I've actually done you guys a little bit of a favor as well. And I've put up 2 of my assignments. One's from one unit and one's from the other. One unit I was succeeding at, and one I was, doing very, very mediocre, very below average marks. And I really want to see if you guys can go on there and if you can tell the difference between the two. I think it's a really good example of where the system was working and where it wasn't working, and I do think that it shows in the assignments. So I'd really love for you guys to give me some feedback on my forum based on which one you think was the good assignment, which one was the not so good assignment. And again, let me stress here, it wasn't my best work, but I actually really learnt from it. I probably learnt the most out of the unit that I was failing than I did out of the unit that I wasn't failing, because it really stuck with me. I think it maybe even scarred me a little bit, but it stuck with me, and it stuck with me for the right reasons, and now we're here. So once again, if you want to see those, that's over on my website, writereadtalklive.wixsite.com, and then /writereadtalklive, and then /forum if you want to get onto the forum. And under the forum section, you'll see that there's an essay subsection there, and it's got 2 posts in it, and that's where you'll find the 2 assignments. So enjoy reading that. They may actually be a little bit difficult to follow in terms of you've got no instructions, but I did my best to kind of try and give you a rundown of what that's all about there. So I hope you've actually enjoyed listening to this blog post. If you want to have a read, it is over on my website, so jump over there and have a look. It's called So I Was Failing or Was I? And please don't forget to check out that video. So it's right at the bottom of the blog post. It's by Stuart Woods. There's a link there for the actual YouTube site, or you can watch the video from my blog post as well. So that's it from me today, guys. Continue to write, read, talk, and live your life. Leah, thank you.